Let's talk about loop control. So there are times when we want to repeat the execution of a code block a number of times. Let's say if we want to go through a code block and repeat that execution as many times, let's say 10 times, for instance, right? We have to have a way of doing that. Likely, we do have what we call a for loop in Java. So let's go ahead. Let's call it for loop. That's one of the loop controls. We have the while loop, and we also have a do while loop as well. Okay, so let's start with for loop first. So here's how you create a for loop. For loop, you start with for, which is the keyword in Java. And if you are in, and you can see right away here with our IDE, we have options here. So if we go to this for loop there, that's the first one. Let's go to the iterate over array, although we haven't talked about array yet, but I just want to show you the skeleton of a for loop. So we have the initialization here. Int I is 0. I is less than args at length, so forget about this args, and then we are incrementing it. So that's the format. Let's go and hit enter so we have that format with us. Okay, so for int is equal to 0, I is less than, let's go ahead and actually put 10 for instance, and I plus plus, so we are incrementing inside of our for loop here. So we are going to put this statement that we want to repeat. So we say system that out that print ln, and we can say running space, and we're gonna append the iterator, which is the I here. Okay, so let's go back and see what's happening here. So this for is our keyword, and we have the initialization of our I. So this I here is loop control variable here, right? This is what we control the loop with. So int I is 0 and I is less than 10, and we increment the I. Each time that goes through, we're going to increment the I, and then we're going to display running and I as it increments. All right, so let's run it so you can actually see what happens. So there we go. As you can see here, we can running 0, running 1, running 2, up till 9. So we said for int I 0, so we have initialization here to I 0 here, and then we say I 0, right? Because we said I 0, so 0 is less than 10. That's true. It goes ahead and runs this, right? And then increments the I each time that it runs. So as you can see here, first time it runs, running is 0 because I is 0. Second times I is 1, and so forth up till 9. So you can go ahead here and add maybe 18 if you wish to do so, and run again, and you can see the same thing happens. Now we go up to 17. This is the most common used loop control, okay? The for loop here. Okay, so just remember, you always have to initialize. So that's the initialization, and then we have the condition, and we are incrementing our loop control, our I. And obviously, this is just a variable. You could have put anything, could have put A or B or your name, but usually you'll see an I here. So the next one, while loop, it's essentially, it's another type of for loop per se, of looping, right? Which is, again, repeating a certain code block as many times as necessary, okay? So the while loop, let's go ahead and comment this out. So while loop has this syntax. So we said while, so enter that. As you can see, there's while. We have to put our condition here. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create a variable, say int counter. So counter is equal to 0. Now our condition here, we're going to say while counter is less, say, than 11, counter, let's make sure we have the correct spelling there, otherwise things won't work. Okay, let's go. So while counter is less than 11, let's go system.out print ln. What do we want to say? Let's say count is, and we're gonna say counter. Okay, plus here. Okay. And then here we're gonna say counter plus plus. So we are incrementing our counter as we loop through. Save this and run. It should say 0 through 10. So this here, it's very familiar because it looks like something we've seen before, an if statement, right? This while here works with Boolean, true or false. So the while statement evaluates this expression here inside, which must return a Boolean value. Now, if this expression here is true, then this while statement here execute all of what it's inside here, and it will continue testing this condition to see if it's true. So when it no longer is true, that's when it stops. When it gets to 11, 11 is less than 11, that's not true. That's the reason why it stops. Doesn't show 11, it just stops at 10. So now let's go ahead and do our do while. Comment this out here. A do while has this format. So you say do, and there we go, do while, enter. So we have a do and we have a while. So it looks like it has a while, but the while is at the bottom. So that's one of the differences between, so the difference between do while and while is that do while executes its expression at the bottom of the loop instead of the top. So therefore the statement within the block are always executed at least once. Okay, so if you have something that needs to be executed at least once, you would use a do while loop. Okay, so the condition would be here. What we can do now, we can just go ahead and let's give a counter 1 here. And then we can say counter is less than 11. And then system out print, say counter like that. And let's make sure we have counter plus plus. Now, if we don't put this counter plus plus here, which is our counter, we are incrementing it, right? We will end up with a problem. Let's comment this out here. Let's save this and run. Uh-oh, look at this. It just keep going because we're not actually counting and incrementing our counters. So whenever it goes back, so that's why you have this going forever. So we don't want that. Okay, so always put our counter at the bottom here, incrementing it. That way you don't run into those issues. Let's clear this. If you save again, we should have it working properly. So from 1 to 10. So now you've learned a for loop, you've learned while loop and do while loop. So loops essentially allows us to run a certain piece of code as many times as we wish it to run, right? 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000,000 times. You can now start to see the power, how powerful this stuff is, right? Because now you can start doing a lot more with Java than what you were able to do 10 lessons ago. All right, so go ahead and play around with what you've learned here. So for loop, while loop, and do while loop. That way you get a hang of it. All right, and don't be afraid. You're not going to break anything. Just keep working at it. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.